Shalom, this is Daniel Stern, and today we're going to talk about a few subjects. We're going to talk about Charlie Kirk, we're going to talk about Qatar and the airstrike there, we're going to talk about Yemen, we're going to talk about what's going on in Gaza and the offensive on Gaza City, we're going to talk about the General Security Service, the ability of Netivyah to nominate a new head, and we're going to take a way out journey to Nepal. So, let's start. I want to start with the tragic and heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday afternoon, America time. It was nighttime here in Israel. And this is likely the most impactful assassination in the United States in the last 50 years, since the time of Malcolm X's assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, and John F. Kennedy's assassination. Outside of the US, there might be a few other impactful ones. For example, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin or the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. But Charlie Kirk, for those of you who are unfamiliar, was a conservative debater and political activist. He encouraged young people to register and to go out and vote. And he conducted public debates like the one in Utah yesterday where he was murdered. He was a steadfast Christian. He loved and supported Israel. He spoke out against anti-Semitism, against trans issues, against abortion, and so on. Now, I personally would on occasion listen to his podcasts on Spotify, as well as view some of his college campus debates on YouTube or clips of them on Instagram. And the thing that stood out to me most was the way he was so charitable and kind to the people he debated with, that he would always encourage his audiences to be respectful, to not boo, to calm down, and would listen to people and would just answer them with such pure logic and his big heart. And he wouldn't mock them. And it was just, really special. I mean, he didn't have 3 PhDs. He wasn't aggressive and sarcastic too much. And he just made a really big change in the world. I mean, to the degree that yesterday Donald Trump decided that the US would lower its flags to half-mast until Sunday. And that is the significance of the figure in the United States. Now, such violence, which is, of course, this is obviously a political assassination. We don't yet know who the assassin was. We do know that apparently he was shot by a sniper hunter rifle from about 200 yards away, 180 meters-ish. The FBI had someone apprehended and then released because he was the wrong person. Local authorities had someone apprehended. He was released because he's the wrong person. The killer is still at large as of this filming. But what we do know is that it's a political assassination because obviously he was targeted out of thousands of people. And such violence by the progressive liberal left has to be condemned. And it is so prevalent since the liberals themselves and their spokespeople say and think that the words are violence, that being offended by someone who disagrees with their viewpoint is tantamount to violence and erasure of them, and thus it allows them to respond with violence. In other words, they are against the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and such violence has to be condemned. His death at age 31 leaves us to wonder where he would have been in 5, 10, 20, or 40 years. Some people say he would have probably been president. But now we will never know. What we do know is that his wife Erica and his 2 small children will be left alone. Let's move on to Qatar. On Tuesday, Israel took an action that changed the equation in the Middle East. Israeli jets struck a building in Doha, the capital of Qatar, which was holding a high-level meeting of Hamas's leadership. Let's break down what we know about this. 1. For the first time in many years, Israel attacked a country that is not categorized as an enemy state. This is a signal to Hamas and others that they are not safe in neutral countries such as Qatar or Turkey. And if those countries choose to host terrorists, Israel will strike with them. 2. The US likely supported this action, since its largest airbase in the Middle East is in Qatar, quite close to the location of the airstrike. And that airbase has anti-air defense. It is extremely unlikely that the jets could fly from Israel to wherever they shot from, still in question, without the US forces knowing about it. 3. The Qataris likely knew about it as well, since their anti-air defense is American, and they likely also spotted the Israeli jets. Now, obviously, both those countries would at the very least have to pretend they didn't know. 4. There has been no credible evidence of the success of the mission or of its failure. Very quickly after the strike, a list of a half dozen of the highest leadership of Hamas were named as killed in the strike, such as Khalid Mash'al, former leader of Hamas and current leader of the international branch of Hamas, and Khalil al-Hayya, the leader of the Hamas in Gaza, as well as a few others. Now, after a couple of hip hip hoorays and cheers, it's been mostly silent from the Israeli side, with some random reporters here and there claiming that they have sources that say that the strike failed, but nothing credible from any proper source. As for Hamas, they stated from the start that the attack failed, but have as of yet to still prove with any credible proof that any of their leaders are still alive. Now, there was one photo of Khalil al-Hayya that surfaced claiming that he was safe, a photo of him with what appeared to be in a hospital with a doctor. But this photo was fact-checked, and it is a photo from 2021 at a routine doctor visit or possibly a dentist even. Additionally, Hamas's track record is to delay the confirmations of any major figure's deaths for days, weeks, and even months. For example, Muhammad Deif, who was killed on July 13, 2024, Hamas only confirmed on January 30th, 2025, over 6 months later, that he had died. My point is that the tactical success of this strike is still very much unconfirmed. There is no proof that these people were killed, and there is no proof that they're still alive. Next point, number 5. That said, the strategic short-term success is undeniable. Israel is striking all over the Middle East with impunity, bypassing the Chinese, the Russian, and the American anti-air systems, as well as, of course, local ones such as the Iranian. Carrying out strikes over 2,500 kilometers away, requiring in-flight refueling and so on, using such advanced ammunition that the target was struck, but the buildings right adjacent to it were not damaged. 6. From a long-term strategic perspective, we still do not know how Qatar and possibly other countries in the Gulf and out of the Gulf will respond. Qatar stated that it will no longer negotiate between Israel and Gaza. And I say to that, good riddance. And it will weigh legal measures against Israel. I expect it will use its diplomatic soft power as well as Al Jazeera, its home network, to attack Israel, which it's been doing all along. 7. It is entirely not clear where the strike came from, as well as what route was used. Jordan stated that their airspace was not used. I haven't found such a similar statement from Saudi Arabia. I did see one report that the missiles were fired from Syria, but that seems a bit unlikely considering the distance between Syria and Qatar. Now, it's very possible that the Air Force jets did not even enter Qatari airspace at all, but launched from outside. But to be honest, the technical and tactical Air Force capabilities are not my area of expertise. I do want to point out, though, that Qatar has never been a neutral negotiator, but rather is a huge sponsor of terror, supporting Hamas and other terrorists around the world, as well as pushing and sponsoring anti-Semitic and pro-Islamic agendas around the world, be it by building mosques and sending imams, radical imams, to teach in Europe and America, or by investing in universities that push radical anti-Semitic agendas. And let me just give you an example. On October 7th at 2:44 p.m., 8 hours after the worst massacre of Jews since World War II, while mothers were being raped in front of their children and the elderly were being marched off as hostages into Gaza, Qatar released the following statement. The Kingdom of Qatar expresses deep concern over developments in the Gaza Strip and calls on all sides to avoid escalation and act with maximum restraint. The Foreign Ministry places the full and sole blame for the escalation on Israel due to its unending breaches of the Palestinian nation's rights. The most recent of them, the repeated invasion of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The ministry emphasizes the need for the international community to urgently force Israel to stop its blatant breaches of international law and to respect the legitimate international decisions and the historic rights of the Palestinian people, to avoid using these events as an excuse to spark a new asymmetric war against the Palestinian civilians of Gaza. The Foreign Ministry repeats and emphasizes the Kingdom of Qatar's strict stand regarding justice for the Palestinian issue and the legitimate right of the Palestinian nation, including establishing an independent country with the 1967 borders and its capital, East Jerusalem. All this, Qatar said, 8 hours into the massacre, while Israelis and foreigners were being burnt alive in their homes. Qatar is not a neutral negotiator. Qatar is evil. Let's move on to Yemen. Not too much to say about it, but I wanted to point out that Yemen is continuing to launch missiles to Israel almost daily. This morning at 5:44, there was a missile from Yemen which landed or was shot down but was headed to the Eilat and Negev region. On Tuesday, there were 3 separate launches throughout the day, which forced me, along with the rest of Jerusalem and other areas, into our bomb shelters. It's crazy that the world has normalized missiles being fired into Israel. Like it's no big deal. And on the flip side, in response to this aggression, Israel's Air Force struck Yemen on Wednesday. 6 Houthi terrorist targets were struck, primarily the port and electric infrastructure. But also, for what I think is the first time, also missile launchers were struck. Let's move on to Gaza. With all this action in Qatar and Yemen, one can almost forget that there is a war going on in Gaza. The Israeli Air Force has struck dozens of buildings in Gaza City, in the north of the Gaza Strip. And for a few weeks now, the IDF has been urging Gazans to head south to the humanitarian safety zones. Recent reports say that about 170,000 have done so, which leaves around 800,000 or so. While there have been reported casualties in the range of about 30 to 50 per day, but here's the thing. Each of these towers which have been destroyed, dozens of them, I remind you, each side lowers or raises the number and attributes it to either terrorists or civilian collateral damage. But the fact is that if dozens of buildings and high-rise towers have been destroyed, and that we can assume that in each one there are at least 20 apartments and probably 50 or more, and that average family size in Gaza City is about 6 people per family, there should be well over 250 people killed for each building destroyed. So if dozens of buildings have been destroyed, we should have expected over 20,000 people to have died. I guess Israel's just really incompetent at genocide. Either that, or there is no genocide in Gaza. Now, a quick note on a couple of other matters that we'll get into in future episodes. As of today, September 11th, and based on a court compromise from 61 days ago, the government can now appoint a new head to the General Security Service, and it is expected that it will appoint former IDF Major General Zini for the job, something that was and will be contested by the figure who is supposed to represent the government, the DA, the legal advisor to the government, but in fact, that person, Gili Barhav Miara, who has been officially fired by the government but is ignoring that fact, that individual who was appointed by the previous government, the current opposition, will probably contest this appointment as she did in the past. Now, let's move on. There seems to be a revolution in Nepal. The parliament building, as well as other government buildings and the private homes of politicians, have been set ablaze, as well as the local Kathmandu Hilton Hotel. Now, from my understanding, this is very much an internal conflict between Gen Zers who are unemployed and impoverished and the wealthy, corrupt government. I may be a little bit naive, but as far as I can tell, this conflict shouldn't affect Israel or the world stage too greatly, although India has beefed up its army stationed on the border with Nepal. Now, because I don't think, or at least as of yet, it doesn't affect Israel too much, then we aren't going to go into it very much. And for now, that is all. Please continue praying for Israel, for the IDF, for the leaders of Israel, for the hostages, for the families of the hostages and the families of the wounded and the over 900 that have died since this war started. I believe it's 904. And if you like this video, if you feel it's significant for someone you know to receive it, please share this with your friends, as well as comment on anything that you may disagree on or anything you'd like me to talk about. Shalom, and God bless you all.